Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Carasoft Technology would like to welcome you to our ServiceNow Federal Tech Talk, The Future of Procurement, making procurement a strategic mission partner. Joining us today with ServiceNow, we have Tommy Coleman, Solution Sales Executive, Customer Workflows, Peter Walsh, Senior Advisory Solutions Consultant, Customer Workflows, and Tim Krakowski, Senior Advisory Solutions Consultant for Procurement Operations. Just to tell you a little bit about Carasoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider supporting public sector organizations across federal, state, and local government agencies, including education and healthcare markets. At this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to our speakers. Team, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Heather. Appreciate that. And again, my name is Tommy Coleman. I'm a solution sales executive supporting our U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, and National Security Group. So looking forward to a great conversation today. So here's a question that we are posed regularly around how do you lower the cost of procurement and also provide a better experience? And as we move as a organization to more out-of-the-box solutions, our answer to that becomes yes, and that becomes across the board for a lot of our tool sets within the ServiceNow ecosystem. So as a publicly traded company, we always have to put our safe harbor out there. And this just states that if you do have any questions, if you do move towards procurement, please reach out to myself or your designated ServiceNow representative to make sure you have the latest and greatest SKUs, as we may have some forward-looking statements here around future releases. And this is today's agenda. So we'll talk about what we see in the marketplace across federal civilian, the DoD, and also our national security customers. We'll show some qualifying questions, an overview of what the technology is, both from a procurement perspective, supplier, and also accounts payable, and then we'll do some demos as well, and Q&A at the end. So this is what we see when we are talking to our customers. What we see is that there is some type of intake mechanism for issues. So that could be a question, it could be a purchase request, it could be, I need an update on a PO, or I need to buy something. And so once that happens, once that requirement, that request happens, it gets thrown over a wall. And from there, the process gets extremely convoluted. There are multiple systems that need to be engaged with, that agents need to use. There's swivel chairing, there is spreadsheets and emails, and that's how this type of work gets managed. It creates not only pain for the requester, but even more pain and a lower level of experience for the agent that wants to provide the information, but it's a really hard thing to do in today's system. And so this is how we see the world, right? Our goal is to digitize those workflows and provide a single layer of engagement across your existing systems of record. So we don't want to take over those systems of record. We want to be that engagement layer with out-of-the-box connectors to those systems, so that when your users and requesters have an issue, have a problem, right, need help with something, it's easily available. And we do that by adding AI, visibility, and reporting on top of all of those systems, so that A, we can get to that answer of yes, and B, we can make sense out of that mess, out of that messy middle, and really get work done. And Peter, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Tommy. I appreciate that. So I'm Pete Walsh. I work for ServiceNow, covering the customer and industry workflows for the federal space. I've been in this space for over 25 years with lots of experience. So and I appreciate Tommy, I appreciate that update. So what we call source to pay, you remember on the previous slide, there's a lot of activity that takes place between sourcing all the way through payment and invoicing. And within that arena, we want to provide procurement stakeholders with a better way to work, right? So we want to provide them with an engagement layer that's more like an Amazon experience, easy to use, powered by battle-tested engagement and ServiceNow workflow platform, which can orchestrate work throughout the procurement life cycles. So procurement managers can use the system to eliminate a lot of those time-consuming work items that prevent them from helping agencies get their business done, right? Behind the scenes, we're going to enable the procurement managers to work seamlessly within their work teams. After getting requests, workflows will eliminate some of the manual intervention and bottlenecks that might take place and come along with processing requests from buyers, finding, onboarding suppliers, working procurement negotiations and requisitions, and then finally paying the vendors. So using the one single system of action, we're able to monitor the procurement process from end to end, ask for approvals at the right time from the right people, and engage with the vendors, all the while keeping the systems of record on the back end up to date. So the complexity here in federal is similar to what we see on the commercial side within a time study that we did, which seems to confirm that about half of the work performed by procurement specialists is related to acquiring products and services and working with the PRs. Almost half of what they do is what I would call out of band activity, looking up what's the status of the request, when's the next management review for a contract, answering vendor questions. Much of this is not handled very well by existing systems of record that they are working with. And that leads to this long day of sending emails, swivel chair, updating spreadsheets, maybe even shadow IT systems to fill in the gaps. So as we talked about, ServiceNow is ideally suited as a system of action needed to reduce that low value work and that time spent finding answers to questions, which really should be available immediately at everyone's fingertips. So what we find is that from source to pay, that's why we call it source to pay operations, obviously, we see that the ERPs might do a good job with the day-to-day transactions, but there's still quite a bit of this activity that happens in between milestones, approvals, answering inquiries, order cancellations, and those are not handled very well by these older unwieldy ERP systems. We store the metadata about the contracts, products, projects as well within ServiceNow. So we can bring front and center what needs to be renewed and when, right? We don't need to replace the systems of record on the back end, since we only need important information from those systems of record, which are used to drive the business process, right? Facilitate and inform the workflows, when things to be done, what milestones are next, and so on. So by centralizing procurement processes on a single system of action and engagement, this operates on top of all of these legacy systems and data sets that you see here. And we can then connect and create and connect workflows that operate freely among these existing the systems of record without needing to do any time consuming rip and replace of these existing investments. The government is up against forced ERP upgrades. They don't want to re-implement everything. What they want is an agility layer that allows them to reduce or eliminate customizations within these large, expensive applications. So with no code, low code digital workflows on a single platform, you can boost the efficiency of your work teams, deliver seamless experiences across the value chain, and gain the comprehensive visibility into the entire end-to-end procurement lifecycle. So let's take a look at some of the capability. So, right, as Tommy pointed out, we have the chaos that is the current process sort of boiled down onto a single engagement layer. And you should be familiar with this concept if you're familiar with ServiceNow. As usual, the legacy systems used by our government customers, never seem to line up with the actual work that has to be done. This is certainly true within procurement and the acquisition space. Here we're talking about the long-running business transactions that start out as a sourcing request to buy something, all the way through to a payment to a vendor, which is why we call it source to pay, right? And there are gaps which these users fill in today using the emails and spreadsheets, as we talked about, to keep things straight. While others might use legacy procurement apps, custom development, but almost all cases there's a disconnect between these source to pay activities that have to be performed and the capability provided by the ERPs and these systems, the financial systems of record that we see along the bottom here. So we include spokes that you see here that can quickly integrate with most of the common applications used within the procurement shops. So here's an example of the single workspace, the Procurement Works workspace, which will be used by procurement officials, and that will be used to deflect the creation of cases, automate many of the manual tasks, all within the context of a single workspace. And we can look at this in detail a little later during the demonstration. So procurement requisitions are implemented really as a procurement case management as usual, which can be used to simplify the creation of requests from buyers and users, and then automate the key decisions for the folks who have to fulfill those requests. And so that's what the ServiceNow implementation of procurement requisitions looks like. It's really a case management infrastructure. If needed, we also provide a shopping hub that would be essentially a front end that the buyers might use, the people who are responsible for keeping supply closets up to date or just buy things. And that would be guided purchasing, a list of products that have been vetted by the list of vendors that have already been onboarded, requests for approvals from the right people at the right time, and ultimately fulfill that purchase order, confirm receipt of those goods, and close out. On the supplier side, there's a workspace there as well. So any supplier interaction that has to take place, any supplier issues that can come up, as you'll see next, we provide a supplier or vendor portal, which then they can use to certify themselves, evaluate in terms of vendor risk management in the context of an onboarding, to make sure that they are vetted by the government prior to be placing their products on the catalog, essentially, is what we're talking about there. So that's a huge capability that we see within the government that's needed, a place really for vendors to interact with the procurement people, the buyers, and the program people. That's key, and we'll go ahead and demonstrate that a little bit later as well. So to onboard a supplier, again, implemented as a case. And again, we'll see that more detail on that during the demonstration. This is a screenshot of the supplier portal. So vendors, once they're onboarded, can submit or self-certify, if you will, in terms of a vendor risk assessment. You might want to capture details about the vendor before you onboard them in terms of risk management, what their profile is. Are they small and disadvantaged? Are they foreign owned? Whatever requirements you have to onboard a supplier could be implemented in the context of this onboarding and a supplier onboarding, and then interact directly with the vendor to fulfill tasks on the back end. So that's what supplier onboarding looks like. It's really a playbook that is implemented to first of all bring on a new vendor, if you will. Perhaps they want to even self-certify or onboard themselves, or in the context of a purchase requisition, we can initiate the supplier onboarding process. And we'll take a look at that a little bit in detail later as well. So the third leg of the stool, we talked about procurement operations. We talked about supplier lifecycle operations. The third leg of the stool, if you will, is accounts payable operations, and that is also implemented as a solution, third leg of the stool, inside of source to pay operations. And that is where you will ultimately cut the PO from the purchase requisition. Again, we're typically talking about integration with the ERPs, and that is integration with the ERPs has been something that I've been doing for probably 25 years now, going back to web methods and simplified procurement operations inside of the legacy systems that existed over the many years. It's the same exact problem for 25 years that we've been working on, and we finally have a platform, I believe, to do this correctly. So here's what accounts payable operations might look like in terms of what dashboards are available. As you can see here, from capture, ingest, the documentation, digitize invoices, and then do two-way matching to make sure that the purchase order matches the invoice, and so on, in terms of document intelligence capability that exists out of the box. That is what really accounts payable operations will help you with, automating some of the manual processes that are associated with the final payment out to vendors, and making sure that there are no exceptions within that process. More on invoice case management. And here we have a case in point. We have an example of a global apparel company who has used source to pay operations to simplify some of their problems that they've been working with. And you can see some of the metrics there. We won't dive into too much detail, but Tommy or Tim, if you wanted to weigh in on this one, this aerospace reference might be a little bit more appropriate for this audience. If you guys wanted to talk to that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I mean, so here we have a large aerospace organization. You can probably figure out who they are if you fly a lot, with over 140,000 employees and any number of, just pick one, right, of suppliers that they manage at any given day, right? So the solution was they were missing deadlines, multiple supplier engagement channels, and not a lot of collaboration across that. And in addition, there was really no visibility by visibility, I mean no accountability, right, into the organization. So what did that mean? They were missing deadlines. They were essentially, the organization was losing money because they were missing their contract deadlines and things along that line. So they were able to leverage our solution, right, to bring hundreds of their suppliers and their engineering processes into one platform, and then integrate that in with their key ERP and data systems, right? So now you can really impact change and really impact the speed of need by automating a lot of those manual processes. And again, adding the AI visibility and reporting on top of that, right? And for them, that meant a significant decrease in lost revenue, B, compliance. They were now compliant against their SLAs for their clients and customers. Thanks, Peter.
Got it. That's amazing. Like it says here, 50% reduction in cost, and rationalizing and the scope of those legacy systems that are out there.
Exactly.
In
Major
aerospace. Got it. I appreciate that. Yeah. So just to sort of tee up the demonstration, we'll go through a couple of personas, and yet what you'll see is that I'm kind of just going to be jumping between browsers to work through the various personas. We have first Shirley, and she works on a program. She's been designated as a buyer within the organization, and uses the shopping hub to or the virtual agent, sort of a chatbot experience to simplify how she raises a request for purchase requisition, let's say, and then finds additional information, whatever she needs, or we as an organization need to provide to buyers to simplify their life. Again, if the request might exceed a dollar threshold, at least in the commercial demonstration environment that we'll see, Shirley's manager will have to approve that request. And then finally, we have Warren, who works in the, he's a procurement official. He's the main guy who works through all of the purchase requests, sourcing requests, contracts. He's the one that keeps it all straight, manage, prioritize, route procurement inquiries and case tasks that might be assigned to contracting officers or whoever, all within this this single workspace. So with that, let me stop sharing the PowerPoint here and just bring up Shirley's persona here. Okay, so we're logged into the system as Shirley. Shirley is again been designated as a buyer. And she logs into her portal. And this should be familiar to anybody who's running ServiceNow today. You guys are probably know ServiceNow very well for the IT infrastructure. This is where IT service management comes in. And we also have HR. So ServiceNow also provides HR and employee workspace services. So that employees can interact with the organization. We have governance, risk, and compliance. This would be an example of what ServiceNow as a commercial entity, their portal might look like. But you might have other microsites, other carousel widgets that delivers information that's relevant to your federal buyers out there. So that's a very configurable workspace that you can use. And from here, they can also get to what we're going to focus on today, which is the purchase and expense area. But first, let's just make sure that we're familiar from the self-service portal. They can always open up a chat window and interact through a bot, if you will. So any strategic sourcing questions that they might have, they could just show me everything. I can chat as a buyer with a live agent on the back end. I can get knowledge. I could see information about existing procurement cases that I have out there available today. So the chat bot is a way of interacting in an automated fashion with as a buyer within the organization. But let's just use the purchase and expense here. You could see any invoices that are out there. supplier services. If I need to register for a P card, I can do that. I could see my purchase requests as well, or I could just flat out visit the shopping hub. So the shopping hub is that Amazon-like experience that is provided out of the box. And from here, we could see that the what are the catalog items that are available for me to buy. Let me just actually go ahead and click on one of these. So in the past, Shirley has bought this microphone before, whatever this widget is. So she's filling up a stock room, and she's going to ask for 100 more of these widgets. So we can just say a request to buy from here. And the system starts asking, so you want to buy 100 of these microphones. Where do you want it delivered? Is it to a stock room? Is it to a work address? Somewhere else, perhaps? When do you need this product? We start asking them about them. Who's going to pay for it? So is there a specific cost center? Or perhaps we want to tie this to a specific contract that Julie can select from. She needs to choose who's actually going to pay for this item, and she needs to give us a reason. So for some reason, these items are needed in the NOC, and that's really all she needs to do. She might want to add a file, perhaps some details about that particular purchase. In any case, you could just submit the request. So now we have a purchase request that's about there that has been waiting for approval. Actually, since I only submitted a request for 100 of these, Michael's management approval did not get kicked off. But if I ordered 1,000 of them, let's say, then Michael, as her manager, would have to approve that particular request. But here's the information about the request. It's for $14,000, which is under our simplified acquisitions threshold. And in this case, she's just sort of waiting again for fulfillment of that particular item. So with that, I'll go ahead and switch personas and log into the system as Warren. So Warren, this is what the procurement workspace looks like for Warren. And immediately we could see that he has a few items that require his review, and any work that needs his attention, some of the tasks that are out there, review existing spend with the expier, with that particular supplier, let's say, or vendor. And in this case, the only thing we need to do is drill down and find the requisition that was the PR that was just created. The other thing he might want to do is just see how is his what does this day look like? How does that work get cut across all of the negotiation events or procurement requests, purchase requisitions, sourcing requests? What does this day look like? And then we can see here recently updated items. He's got a list of quick links down here. But in this case, the only thing he needs to do is to bring up that purchase request. Actually, let me make sure I've got the right one here. So it's 1006. Yeah, so it's this one right here, which is on his right on his homepage here. And as the purchasing agent, or basically the procurement officer, the only thing he needs to do in this case is see what information the buyer is requesting. Who is she? He can open up the record and perhaps create a discussion directly with Shirley. But in this case, this is a pretty standard buy. It's using a already vetted vendor. And the only thing he needs to do now is to just create the purchase order. So the PO has been cut for this particular item. In fact, we can just go ahead and open it. And from here, what we've done, obviously on the back end, we'll have to talk about what does integration look like for your particular organization. Are you running Oracle? Are you running some sort of SAP or any of those finance systems on the back end that would need to be updated at this step in the process? And we can see here for this PO, what are the line items? We ordered 100 of these Yeti microphones. We could also see we know what contract Shirley works on, so we could see the related contract that's associated with this, whether we have a BPA with them or some sort of other contract model that's associated with that particular PMO. Okay. So that's sort of a one and done, pretty straightforward, right? A buyer purchases an item, and then the procurement officer goes ahead and approves it, cuts the PO, and she's done. Okay. Now, what if we're in our shopping hub here, and we're looking through, we can't find the item that we're looking for, and she could just click this don't see what you need. I look through the catalog. I cannot find the I cannot find. Let me get rid of this thing here. Yes, I want to end the conversation and get rid of that. So in this case, we don't have a vendor that provides a particular service. So she would click on a list of items. She can ask questions. She can cancel a purchase that she's recently made, submit a quote, create an RFP or an RFI. Or in this case, what I'd like to do is just click on the I need a service. So I need something that doesn't exist in our catalog. So here I'll create a catalog item, and this is, we'll just name this one 928. Content design services, web design services is required. Our team is organizing a workshop. We need some software, or we need some services rather. And it starts asking, do you have a specific supplier in mind? Is there one that you would like us to reach out with? So if you can't find a supplier, we can go ahead and say add one. So this is, Carasoft, web design, and go ahead and just add that arbitrary vendor as a potential supplier for this requisition. It starts asking her how much is your budget for this thing? Do you need it within a specific time frame? You could say yes. The start for this particular effort begins on the 2nd and goes through the end of the year, let's say. And again, it starts asking, where do you want this to be delivered? To a saved location. Again, the buyer is logged in. We know where she works, but she might want to have it delivered to another lab, perhaps. And again, she can specify who's going to receive the item. She can add attachments, some sort of requirements document that's associated with this purchase. And at this point, she can just submit it. So again, our sourcing request has been created. Again, I'm going to log back in as Warren. And we see a brand new sourcing request has been created. So a sourcing intake request uses a guided playbook. So what you'll see here is in the context of this sourcing request, we run through the exact steps that have to take place in the exact order to guide the procurement official through the process of processing one of these sourcing requests. So we could see that it's assigned to me. We can again see who the owner is. We could see a description of the services that she's asked for. And essentially all he's doing at this point is reviewing the request. So at this point, you could just say, I reviewed it, I want to continue. The next thing he needs to do in this guided playbook is to review the purchase line items. So we have, again, a purchase line item here. It's an individual user unit of services that has been requested. And again, he can just click continue. So this particular request, again, does not require approval. It hasn't reached a specific dollar value in amount, perhaps, and does not require approval. So again, I can just click continue. So you guys are starting to see, I see how this works. These playbooks really are the way of guiding a user through a sourcing request, applying business rules. Let's say the dollar threshold exceeds this. It's not one of those simplified acquisitions processes. It's a larger program. I might need to include other people in the approval process, and any steps that you guys need to apply in the context of bringing on a sourcing request. And ultimately, what you'll see is that the sourcing request, since we're using a brand new vendor, kicks off the vendor onboarding. So the supplier onboarding process will be kicked off once we get through the sourcing intake stage of the sourcing request. So if there's any ad hoc tasks that have to be created, Warren can do that from there. But in this case, I'll just go ahead and continue with the sort of happy path here. There are no exceptions. Everything looks good. So the next step in the process is to choose a sourcing approach. So with this, he could just skip to the qualification stage. And what we see here is that a few tasks have been created that are automatically as part of this sourcing approach phase. So we can manage the qualification of work. So we assign some of them to me, some of them to Alejandro. And if there's any other task, perhaps you want to, let's say, create a task to verify whether the vendor is vetted, or is a small disadvantaged business, any sort of federal specific requirements for a sourcing request would be implemented at this stage of the workflow. So we can just sort of complete qualification here. I believe this will kind of move the ball forward. Maybe Tim, you can help me get some of these done here. We could go ahead and complete some of these tasks.
Yeah, for the purposes of the demo, we don't have to complete the task. We can
Okay.
Thanks. Up right here.
Okay. Great. So at this point, we can we'll go ahead and maybe review some of the details of the work. Eventually, what we'll want to do, Tim, is to get it to the point where the vendor risk kicks off here. So let me just dismiss some of these warnings. So basically, the playbook, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to get through this demonstration in a short amount of time, but basically the playbook is guiding the user through, well, you haven't done this step yet, and you haven't done that step yet. But for the purposes of our demo today, we could bring up another instance here. And what you'll see is that at a certain phase in the process, what we'll do is we'll create a vendor risk assessment for that particular vendor. And at that point, what we'll have is a customer will be invited to join the supplier portal. And they are then invited to log in, first of all, and then secondly, to self-attest, to vet the vendor itself. We ask them to sort of self-certify themselves, send them a questionnaire that requires them to ask specific questions. Are you a small business? Are you women-owned, or any other sort of questions that you might want to ask as part of the assessment. And then in the next stage, we'll ask them to go ahead and upload their any documentation that they're required to fill out. So in this section, we can go ahead and submit documentation that's required as part of this vendor risk assessment. The other thing that once the supplier is onboarded, we can provide them with knowledge. So a lot of government organizations simply don't have a good way of collaborating with the vendors that they work with. And once we do have a way to assign them tasks, show any assessments that are due, any issues or tasks that we can assign to that particular brand new vendor, can be available to them. They'll get the notification that they have to update their information. And the other thing is, once they're onboarded, we can start to deliver knowledge and a place to provide frequently asked questions, let's say, that always come in from our vendors, where they're always asking this question or that question. Well, let's provide them through the supplier portal a way to deliver that information, and then they can search for it. They could search for knowledge. They could search for through a list of frequently asked questions. And this way, the organization can collaborate with the vendor community to answer any questions that they might have as they sign up to do work with your particular government organization. So that's kind of a very quick and dirty run through. What we saw is on the procurement side, we can allow buyers to submit requests. We saw how the procurement officials, the procurement officers, can review those requests, approve them, finally cut the PO. We saw a vendor onboarding process kicked off from a request for brand new services from a list of vendors that might want to go ahead and submit to complete that work for the government. And then finally, once the vendor has been selected, we can onboard them. We can run them through vendor risk assessment, make sure that they're not foreign owned or working for an adversary, and finally bring them on as a vendor. Once they're logged in and vetted, we can then collaborate with those vendors through the supplier portal that we see here. So with that, let me just sort of end the demo part for me. Tim, I think you wanted to go ahead and share the final, let's call it the third leg of the stool, which is the accounts payable operations.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, sir. I'll stop sharing.
All right. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. Just want to validate you guys can see my screen.
We do.
Perfect. Okay. I want to start the process as a supplier or vendor. And I'm logged in here as a supplier portal, and you'll look like, it looks an awful lot like what Peter has already shown from a government employee perspective. And we basically use the same framework, but the portal is made available to external third-party suppliers. Now, everything that you see here from a supplier portal perspective, as well as all portals within ServiceNow, is completely up for grabs in terms of the styling, the fonts, the images, and so forth. Now, Within this context, we're logged, as I mentioned before, we're logged in as Frank, who's a supplier from Microsoft, and Frank wants to submit an invoice. So he'll click raise a request, go into his invoices tab, and then click submit a new invoice. Now from here, he has the opportunity to choose whether it's a PO invoice or whether it's a non-PO invoice, meaning do we have to match it to a purchase order and goods receipt or not? And then if it is a PO invoice, select which invoice we're uploading to. And then here we'll just choose the file of the invoice itself. And once we submit that request, that creates a new invoice processing case, and Frank will receive notifications on the status of that case. Now, also, really quickly, Frank also has the option to submit those cases via email as well, right? So just to point out, there's a couple of ways to get invoices within the system. Now, we're going to transition to the accounts payable workspace. And once again, this is a purpose-built interface for accounts payable professionals. And what we see here is a basic dashboard showing the state of my work as a accounts payable professional, how many invoices I have in different statuses, as well as kind of a view of invoices that are due soon and invoice exception types. Now, what I want to do is drill in to that invoice request, an invoice request that we just received. You'll see here, once again, it's from Frank. If I open the invoice processing case, we're met with a notification that there's been an error for invoice processing. Now, what the system does is it takes the invoice document, in this case, it's a PDF file, it ingests the invoice document and it runs through our technology for OCR recognition, which we call Doc Intel, and it basically attempts to extract the relevant information about that invoice from the document itself. In this case, the system notified us that there were a few errors. And so the basic idea here is that we will pop into the invoice and we'll see I've got a number of fields. And if I pick and choose, it says, oh, I found that field. I found my invoice due date field, but there's a couple of items that show up in red. And in this case, the system is not 100% sure that that is the correct answer. In this case, it is. So we'll say, yes, you got that correct. Okay. We'll say that's the one that we want. And we'll move down, remit to state. We'll say, yep, that's exactly that's not exactly the item that we want. Our remit to state is Texas, so we'll go ahead and pick that. And as I pick these items, what happens is we're able to train the model so that the next time that an invoice of this type is submitted, the model will get smarter about being automatically able to ingest the items that we have. Now, the next thing that we have is the ability to go through the invoice line items themselves, right? And so we'll see here, I've got one item here, and we're able to determine that that is in fact correct. So we'll say, yep, that's good. We'll select it. Okay. We'll say that's good. And then here we'll go, it says here this line description is missing in the document, but let's go ahead and say, nope, that's in fact not missing in the document. I'm going to flag for follow-up, mark as reviewed. And then once we complete all of these items, we have the opportunity then to submit this invoice to be completed. Okay. Now, I want to jump into a additional case where we actually have an invoice, right? In this instance, once the invoice has been read and has been processed, we have the ability to review the actual invoice and submit the invoice for exception management checking, as well as PO matching, third-party matching, and so forth. Any additional approvals that are required, the system can automatically generate and send those approvals out, similar to what we have seen already in Peter's demo. And we have the opportunity then at that point, once all of the exceptions have been managed, we have the opportunity to then submit the invoice to our payment system and make that invoice ready for payment. Okay. And so with that, we'll kind of jump into the next and kind of final piece of our demonstration. So everything that we've seen today as it works within the context of ServiceNow is tracked. Every work item is tracked within the system, and that allows us to generate a series of reports and dashboards automatically. The system comes out of the box with a number of predefined metrics, reports, and dashboards so that you can gain visibility and control over your existing processes, which tend to be pretty chaotic. Here's an example of one from an invoice processing perspective. We can see how many invoices I have with exceptions, how many overdue invoices I have. And if we drill into any one of these items, it's going to take us to those records so that we can do additional review at the individual record level. We also I have simply here just a different dashboard of a different type, showing a procurement strategy and operations dashboard that shows us, our spend year to date, spend by categorization, spend by supplier. And once again, we have the ability to drill in to each one of these items and get additional information. So we're able to manage our overall process from a sourcing and procurement and accounts payable perspective. And with that, I want to pause and ask if there are any additional questions.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that.
All right, so let's.
I'll take, if you just want to bring up the PowerPoint, or I could do that just to kind of bring up our call to action here.
Why don't you go ahead? I don't have it handy real quick.
Okay, it said asking me to ask you to stop sharing.
Oh, okay. Well, I will stop sharing. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'll just bring up the slide deck again, and we'll run through it. This is real quick. Just in terms of enablement, there is a ton of information out there on Now Learning to get accredited for procurement operations management, source to pay, training that's available. We've met recently with the partner community on this and provide resources to any partners that are out there. And so this will be in the leave behind. We have the product documentation as well as a link, which will be in the PDF that we sent out after this call is over. So the call of action is to complete any training that might be of interest, register for any enablement sessions that are coming up. And again, we have some bookmarks to, some interesting community source to pay operations type content, federal partners information that might be of interest. So with that, I think we'll start the Q&A session. I'm just going to stop sharing here.
Yeah, Peter, there's one question in the chat around, and I'll read it. Government customers often have dynamic or complicated funding sources. Does this solution allow for truncated or segmented funding allocations and releases? So MOUs, memorandums of understanding from other agents, or internally agreements between multiple departments, right? And
oh, I see. So
yeah.
a BPA that is covered by let's say a vendor and his subs or something to that effect.
Yeah,
I see. Let's
say I have a purchasing agreement in place, right? So I'm in comm, but maybe another mission partner right? We have an agreement to do these procurements for you, and then maybe a chargeback type model.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So that would be tied into the contracts. Now, contracts is something that already exists in ServiceNow, and procurement essentially just leverages the existing contract management infrastructure that's provided by ServiceNow. The alternative would be to pull that information in from the ERP or let's say the CLM system of record, and include that as part of the workflow. There's a couple of options there for handling that particular use case from my perspective. Tim, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for this particular question, the devil is in the details.
Yeah.
In terms of making sure the complexity of managing multiple funding sources is managed appropriately. But I have no doubt that the system is capable of doing that. We just need to understand the specific workflows that are going to be required.
Yep.
Got it. What were the other questions? We have just 2 minutes here, Tommy. I'm sorry, while I was sharing, I was not able to.
No worries. I think we got to the other questions that are in the chat, and I don't see any more.
Yeah, this one about incorporating GSA Advantage or posting the FedBiz ops. We often see those as requirements for federal. So the answer is there an ability to integrate with GSA Advantage and their website? Absolutely. Same with FedBiz ops. Again, the devil's in the details in terms of being in a federal environment, probably running on our government community cloud, most of you guys.
Yep.
And its ability to reach out to GSA or reach out to FedBiz ops to post information, if you will, once the award is created.
Yep.
Or the solicitation, rather. Let's see what else we got here. Cost centers, yeah. So I'm not sure cost centers in terms of when the buyer selects, I want to purchase something. She has to tell us who's going to pay for this. So the cost center is kind of a, as you saw the demo environment, it's kind of geared towards a commercial entity like ServiceNow. But it typically, right, we could also allow the buyer to assign the PR with a specific contract. That's something that we can do as well. Let's see.
Cool. Well, we are at the top of the hour. I'm going to be respectful of time.
Well, great.
Yep. And I don't see any more questions in the chat. Peter, Tim, thank you guys very much. Heather, thanks again for hosting.
Thank you very much.